side as well. All right, the third game on Tuesday night, we have Southern Miss and South Alabama. South Alabama now up to 18.5-point home favorites, 53 being the total in this game. I mean, if you're going to take Southern Miss in this game, C-Mac, you're taking a team that didn't score an offensive touchdown last week, and there's been multiple. Their touchdown was on a punt return. I mean, that is what we're talking about here with Southern Miss. And look, their defense hung in there. I still had to sweat it out with the bet that I mentioned last week. I loved Old Dominion as a small dog against Southern Miss, and it was still not an easy one. In fact, we needed a goal line stand from the Old Dominion defense late in the fourth quarter to have that 17-13 win hold up. But we got it. That's all that matters. And really, it's just an inept offense last week for Southern Miss, which is surprising because we just saw that team rack up 37 against Arkansas State, although admittedly a pretty bad defense. 36 against Texas State. That's a better defense. So it was surprising to see that Southern Miss offense, really struggle like that. Billy Wiles has been very erratic throwing the football. It's one of those teams that if they can't run the football, they're really not going to do much on offense. And running the football has been a problem for Southern Miss. They're only averaging 3.9 yards per pop running the football this year. And they're facing a South Alabama defense here that, as we know, can stop the run. A defense that's pretty good overall. Now, they did have their tough two tough games in a row where that defense struggled, but Central Michigan and James Madison, I don't mind them struggling there because James Madison's got a terrific offense this year. So South Alabama getting carved up by them is not like, I'm not totally worried by that. They got back on track in their last game. They held UL Monroe to 7 points, a 55-7 beatdown for South Alabama over UL Monroe. This is one of those games where it feels like it's a lot of points. Southern Miss has been able to hang in a couple of these games. They only lost by 7 against Arkansas State. The loss to Texas State was 14. The loss to Old Dominion last week was 4. The loss to Tulane was 18. If they lose by those margins in this game, you're cashing a ticket with Southern Miss, getting 18.5 in this game. So it feels like this to me is hold your nose and take a shot with Southern Miss. I just feel it's a little inflated here to lay this many with South Alabama. They probably win the game, but not comfortable in this price range with them. What do you think here, C-Mac? Southern Miss, South Alabama.
Yeah, can they stay in this number? Because it's just depending on the number, they haven't been able to cover. Southern Miss, all those games you mentioned, they're 0-5. It's just like they just can't get a cover. But this is a boatload of points. I think South Alabama hasn't played well all year, and then to go, a Monroe team that could, surprise some people, especially at home, and they just blew them out the water a couple of weeks ago. So they're off the bye. I think they win. I don't want to lay the points here in this game. Initially, I did, can Southern Miss score a little bit with their horrible offense? Because you mentioned those 2 games, they got the points, but any other team, they weren't able to score. Can they get there? Because maybe this game could get over. But for now, I want nothing to do with it.
Yeah, it's a tricky game. I don't think I'll get involved, but I feel like Southern Miss, and look, I don't normally like betting teams that haven't covered ATS this season. They haven't covered against an FBS opponent this year, Southern Miss. I think they actually covered in their first game, but that was against a FCS opponent. Yes, Alcorn State. They haven't covered a point spread, though, against an FBS opponent, but it feels like it's a lot of points. It really does. And South Alabama's not been that level of consistency one game to the next that we've seen in years past. And to be honest with you, Carter Bradley, the Toledo transfers, their quarterback, he's kind of been up and down this year. 5 interceptions. That's not like him. He's a very experienced quarterback. Now, he has had 11 touchdowns. He did have a huge game against UL Monroe. Still, I think, and LaDamian Webb's an outstanding running back for South Bama as well. They can throw it. They can run it. They're going to really challenge Southern Miss, but it is a lot of points. And keep in mind, last year's meeting between these two teams decided by 7. It was a 27-20 victory for South Alabama last year when these two teams played. So it was a relatively competitive game. So, yeah, it's a small lean to the dog here. Hold your nose and bet them.
Can they run it? Can Frank Gore Jr., can they, which, I know he's been dealing with some stuff, but just hasn't been great so far this year.
No, he's
Can
been
they hang
not.
around?
And this is a guy that carried them offensively last year in particular. But you look at what he's done. He had no running room against Old Dominion. 2.3 yards per carry is what they
Man.
averaged with Frank Gore running the football against Old Dominion. If that happens again here, they're in trouble against South Alabama. So they got to get that run game a little bit going a little bit better than last week.